Hello to everyone in the Holy Trinity Greek Orthodox Cathedral community and all of our friends. This is Father Jonathan. I hope you're doing well. Today we're going to continue our reflections on the Psalms of Orthodox Christian liturgical worship with a continued reflection on Psalm 140, according to the Septuagint numbering of the Book of Psalms. In the Masoretic or the Hebrew translation, the original Hebrew, this will be Psalm 141. And so if you're using most Bibles, unless if you have an Orthodox Study Bible, you will be following along with Psalm 141. But if you have an Orthodox Study Bible or a Bible that uses the Septuagint numbering, you'll find it at 140. And we've been talking about this psalm for quite some time now. It's really significant, and we're chanting it in its entirety, either in a melismatic way or in a quick way, but intoned in the tone of the week or the day. And because of that, we actually end up pausing on the verses. We really get to know these verses, and so it's worthwhile for us to consider what these verses are teaching us in our lives, especially because, again, this is a psalm that is chanted at the beginning of the new day at Vespers in the evening. And so we talked before about the significance that we find in verse 5 and 6, where we're called to find a righteous person and they will chasten us first and foremost and reprove us. And as I said in the previous reflection, it's really significant that we find a righteous person to be our guide, who can be our guide, but not necessarily a guide that it's going to coddle us, but be strict and really see what we need and challenge us when we're falling short. And at the same time, we're called to live in a way that keeps us separated and not in communion with those people who are unrighteous, that are sinful, that are not living the way that they ought to be. And so we're called to not live in that way. And then we'll continue on with where we left off in the previous reflection with Psalm 140 verses 7, and we'll finish out this psalm today, reflecting on a few parts of it, but we won't finish our discussion of this psalm immediately. We'll continue for at least a couple more reflections on the psalm. So verse 7 continues, "For yet more is my prayer in the presence of their pleasures. Swallowed up near by the rock have their judges been. They shall hear my words, for they be sweetened. As a clod of earth is broken upon the earth, so their bones have been scattered nigh unto Hades. Unto thee, O Lord, are my eyes. In thee have I hoped. Take not my soul away. Keep me from the snare which they have laid for me, and from the stumbling blocks of them that work iniquity. The sinner shall fall into their own net. I am alone until I pass by." Now we'll break this up a little bit over the next few days, but I wanted to really dig deep in connection with our previous reflection. We find out in this reading that the way that we are called to live our lives that way of life becomes a judgment against those who are living unrighteously. And a righteous life will be a reproval. It will be something that will cause us to consider the ways in which we are falling short. And it doesn't mean that we judge those who are falling short, but a righteous life will be a means by which we can determine what an unrighteous life is. And those who are choosing to live unrighteously will suffer the reality of the consequences that arise out of their unrighteous way of life. They choose to live unrighteously, that is, in a way that is antithetical to God's divine will for all things. And because of that, they'll be swallowed up. They'll be swallowed up by their own unrighteousness, by their sinfulness, by the ways in which they have fallen short in who they were called to be in relationship to God. And our words ought to be words that give pause to those who would be unrighteous. we ought to live in a way, our spoken words and our lived words, the way that we live our lives, become a word spoken against those people. And those who will hear it will come to realize, hopefully, that if they are living unrighteously, it is only unto their own destruction. And that's why we hear in a very beautiful imagery, and it took me a while to really understand what this meant, because it's so poetic oftentimes when you read it. But it says, as a clod of earth is broken upon the earth, so have their bones been scattered nigh unto Hades. Now, Hades, again, is hell. Hades is the place of death, the dark place. And we hear that in the same way that a clod or a clump of dirt, like if you ever been digging in the dirt, and sometimes dirt bunches together, and it almost looks like a rock. And when that clod or that clump of dirt is thrown against the ground, it shatters and spread everywhere, spread to its own destruction, so that there's almost nothing left of its former shape. Well, the same thing it will be true of those who are living unrighteous lives. They will be shattered. Their lives, their spiritual lives, will be shattered so that they will go down into Hades, away from in a way, away from the presence of God. In another way, we are ever in relationship with God, but in a way that will become destructive. They will relate to God because they've chosen to live in a way that's unrighteous, that doesn't fulfill or isn't in accordance with God's divine plan for salvation. And so this is our reminder during the beginning of the new day, is we are not to live as unrighteous people. And starting from this very moment, we have to be mindful of the ways in which we are called to be righteous, and those things that are signs of righteousness. And sometimes it can be hard for us to really determine what is good and true and right and beautiful, which is why, again, as we said in the previous reflection, it's so important to have a spiritual guide, a spiritual father or mother, someone who is more along in the journey, or further along in the journey of spiritual life, so that they can offer the wisdom to you in a way that you'll hear, whether it's a way that's easy, kind, and gentle if you need it, or one that is a little bit sterner, stricter, one that will challenge you to really change the way you are. And that's really important, because we do not want to go by the way of a clod of earth that is broken upon the ground, a clump of earth, a clump of dirt that when it strikes the ground, it explodes in its own destruction, and it's no longer what it once was. We don't want to be that way because of our unrighteousness. We don't want to be that way because we are choosing to live apart from God. And from the beginning of the new day, we ought to remember the life that we want to live, the authentic life that we want to live in relationship with God, so that we do not fall into this type of destruction. And I know this can sound a little harsh, and I don't want to go on too much into this or leave you on a kind of this darker note, but it's a realistic note. We are called to live in a way that is different than perhaps many of us have found ourselves living in the midst of the world. We are called to be righteous, to live in every aspect of our lives in accordance with the divine will of God for us, that all will be saved, that all will come to know Him, that will be in union with Him, will be in communion with Him, and in return will manifest virtues which are signs of that communion with Him. We will be gentle and kind and loving, most importantly. That is how we will be, and not in a way that leads, and not live in unrighteous ways that leads us not to virtue, but to vice and ultimately destruction. God bless you. We're here for you. We love you dearly. Don't hesitate to reach out. If you need anything, just send us an email, leave us a message in the comments section, send us a note on social media, or send us or give us a call, whatever you want. We are here for you. We love you dearly. Have a beautiful start to your week.